Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video I am doing a window card just to help kind of draw the eye into the focal image. So I'm going to be using a stencil. So I have both of my sizes of blending brushes here, my big and my small. Both of those were purchased off of Amazon. And then I'm using quite a few inks today. So I just brought in my whole tray here. These are my Concord and 9th inks. I really haven't had the chance since I swatched them to use my NOIR ink colors, and so I'm going to use a few of those today. The other thing we're going to use is this PinkFresh Studio. This is the garden florals. We're going to be using the stencils, which there are 5 of them, and we are going to be using the coordinating die that goes with it. The reason why I have the smaller blending brushes is because some of these stencils have multiple floral images or components on the same stencil, which saves you on cost, but can make blending tricky if you don't want to mask, which I'm super lazy and I don't like to mask, so I just use smaller blending brushes. Here I have some cream colored cardstock. This is from Paper Studio, and I'm using this waffle flower nesting portrait arches. And I cut that piece down to 4 by 5 1/4 because I wanted to have a little bit of a border on the outside edges of this image here, of this frame. Now I went and put that through my die cut machine, and my plates were dirty. And so I was gonna end up popping this up on foam anyway. So I decided that I would go ahead and use the dirty ones, and I'm just trimming a little bit off of each side of one side and the top, just so that I can nestle these back behind. And when I go to line them up, I'm gonna line them up and stack them, making sure I'm aligning the arch and not like the edges. So I just used liquid glue and was making sure my edges of my arch lined up, and then I'm gonna take some scissors and kind of go underneath that and trim off any that's hanging off the edge. In the stencil there are little etched registration marks, and I am just lining up my paper on the left-hand side of that each time. The left top and the left bottom registration mark, and then I'm going to go ahead and start ink blending. You can, these stencils are numbered. I didn't go in the order that they are numbered. It doesn't really matter. And just so you know, when you're going to stencil these in, some elements of these stencils overlap one another, so if you are concerned about making brown or some weird color, be conscious of that when you're picking colors to layer on top of each other. Like I said, I'm using all of my Concord and 9th inks today, and the first one I am using for this lighter layer of this stencil is Sprout, and then the other part of the other greenery will be Parsley. I am doing this in like pastel colors, springy colors. I realize that when this video is posted, it's going to be more fall, and you could absolutely do this in fall colors or jewel tones. It'd be very beautiful. But I wanted to, I had this color palette in mind, so that's what I went with. So here's the other stencil. I thought for some reason it was doing like detail layers on these already down leaves I've already done, but it doesn't. It makes different greenery. So this is the Parsley, and once I have this all stenciled in, I'm going to move on to some of my florals. I'm going to go ahead and speed up the video at this point because all it is very simple ink blending. I'm not doing any shading or anything fancy. I am just putting down a light layer of each color. So I wanted to have each of these flowers be a different color. I was trying to do a rainbow, like a pastel rainbow, and so that's why I am also using my smaller blending brushes, because it helps me get into smaller areas. So this is the Parsley, yes, which is just a darker green. The Sprout and the Parsley, I believe, were already out. I don't think those were new colors, but I do use several new colors, particularly with the florals. So my rainbow, the green is coming from the greenery in my rainbow, but each of these flowers is going to be a slightly different color. One of the things to note, and I think it's on this next stencil. No, it's on this one. So this particular stencil has the centers of the flowers, and I chose to do that in Dove ink. I didn't want brown, I didn't want black, so I went with a gray. And this Dove is a very pretty, like, I think it's more of like a neutral gray. Maybe more toward a cool tone, but it's very pretty, and I really was pleased with that choice. Now, in all transparency, I end up covering this section of these flowers up anyway with a little gem. But if you wanted to keep things more flat and one layer, or maybe you don't even have some shiny sparkly things, then gems are the way to go, and you can forgo the Dove. So this first flower I am doing in reds, and that first lighter layer was in carnation. This second flower, the bigger one, is in nectar. Yes, is nectar. So that was just kind of a lighter yellow. This particular stencil, it does some detail layers, and it also does some other flowers. So I'm trying to be very conscious of what colors I'm putting where, and what is going to be the detail layer, and that's always a darker layer, a darker color. So I'm just trying to be very conscious, and I peel up the corner of the stencil just to make sure I'm happy with my blending. So the detail layer on the quote-unquote red, which is more pink, flower is going to be sweet pea. The detail layer on the yellow flower is sunflower. So for my pink combination, I'm doing carnation and sweet pea. For my orange, I'm doing nectar and grapefruit. For my yellow, I'm doing buttercup and sunflower. For my blue, I'm doing harbor and blueberry. And then there's little like blossoms around like the perimeter of this. They're really not even connected. So this is kind of a whimsical-ish stencil. So it's not very realistic. If you didn't line things up perfect, it really doesn't matter. It's just kind of a very loose and whimsical stencil anyway. So don't stress about getting things perfectly lined up, because it's not the end of the world. So the purple of my rainbow comes in with those little tiny flowers that are on the outside. And like I said, my green comes from the greenery, and that was in sprout and parsley. I do very simple ink blending, but if you wanted to go back in and put in some color pencils or some alcohol markers detail, you absolutely could. I toyed with the idea of putting some sparkle over all of this, or some accents of like glossy accents. If you wanted to put some white gel pen accents, you could. I just wanted to keep it kind of as it was, and keep it very simple. This was a very quick card to put together, and if you wanted to make it even quicker, if you were perhaps going to mass produce this card, you could limit the number of colors you were using. So this is everything stenciled. I really like how it turned out. I think it's very pretty, and I'm glad that I did kind of a rainbow and took the time to do more colors. I want to show you how I clean off my stencils in case you've never been here before. I just take my flour sack cloth and I spray over some stamp cleaner on the front and the back and wipe the stencil clean, and that is all it needs. If I was using a texture paste or a gel or any type of medium like that, I would take that to my sink right as soon as I was done, because once those particular mediums harden on your stencil, they're typically trashed. So the inks, not a big deal. I'm going to take the coordinating die, tape it in place, and run it through my die cut machine, and then we will come right back. That die cut really well, and there are little sections inside of the die, or inside of that floral bouquet, that cuts out also. What I was showing you there is that sometimes like your pressure is really good on your die cut machine, and you can almost get like indentions or embossing lines from like the die in places that there shouldn't be any. So all I do is flip the die over, the die cut over, and take the back end or the flat end of my bone folder and kind of rub over it. This one, I flipped it to the front and did the same thing, and that helps. It doesn't totally eliminate the visibility of that, but it does help it. So now I'm just kind of playing with my placement here. I toyed with the idea of putting this on a white panel, but I actually liked the pop of color behind the die cut. So I did a kind of purpley card base, and this cardstock comes from Die Cuts Love Paper on Etsy, and I will put her info below in the description box. You could definitely use white. You could use a specialty paper, perhaps like a glitter paper or a pearlescent vellum even. That would be really pretty, but I chose to do kind of a plain matte cardstock for the back. I'm going to kind of fiddle and figure out where I want to place this, and I'm going to tape it in place using some of the same tape that I used to die cut. No one's ever going to see this. We're going to glue it all down flat to the card, so no one's ever going to see that tape there. It's just to help hold things in place while I apply my glue and while I flip it over onto the card base and adhere everything down. I'm going to set my Misty on top of that just while it dries so that I can ensure that I've got good adhesion, and then we're going to move on to the sentiment. I'm using the Simon Says stamp Elegantly Modern Sentiments. This has a stamp, a die, and a foil plate. I'm just going to use the stamp and the die today, but the foil plate would have been beautiful. I just didn't want to break out with more stuff. And I wanted to bring out the blue that was in the floral arrangement. So I'm just going to take a piece of that same cream cardstock. Again, I toyed with the idea of doing it on the white to match the florals, but I opted to go with the cream. And then I'm going to use the same Harbor ink that I used on the blue floral to stamp this out. Because it is a new stamp, and I apologize, I'm kind of out of the frame there, I am stamping this a couple of times. I think I ended up stamping it 3 times just to make sure I had a really good impression. This ink does smooth out as it dries, so that's something to be aware of. I probably could have gotten away with 2 stampings, but I ended up doing like 3. I took the coordinating die and cut that out 2 more times from that same cream colored cardstock, and I'm just going to stack all these together to give it more dimension and to help it line up with the dimension that is on the arched frame. And then we will glue that down toward the bottom right hand side of our card, and we'll glue that down flat. I decided the sentiment needed a little bit of sparkle, so I'm going to take my Spectrum Noir clear glitter brush pen and brush that all over the sentiment. And just to give it a little bit of sparkle, you could put some glossy accents over the top of that just to make it have like a puffy sticker look, but I just wanted to stick with just the shine and sparkle from the clear glitter brush pen. The final bit of embellishment is 3 gems in the centers of those flowers, again covering up that dove. You could forgo that. These, if you wanted to, you could put like a pearl dot there or whatever, but I thought these little gemstones were really pretty, and those come from BLINGEE THINGEE on Etsy, and I will link her below also. But that is it. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. Bye!